My name's Mary Mitchell, and this is the second part of my vlog about my trip around the United States in my Class B camper van. I call him Ramsey because he's built on a Dodge Ram. I made the trip with my dog, Annie, who's 14. We had a great time. So stick around and I'll give you 4,000 miles in 33 minutes. I left off in the last video in Norwich, Vermont, where I stayed for 4 days while my niece got married. I'd been consulting this great map put out by the National Park Service back in 2016. You'll notice two national sites by Norwich: the Marsh, Billings, Rockefeller National Historic Park and St. Gaudens National Historic Site. While the professionals prepared for the wedding, I went to see them. A tree-lined drive leads you to the home of August St. Gaudens. He was a clever sculptor who worked during the 1800s. He sculpted statues like Abraham Lincoln standing on the front lawn, reliefs such as this one of General Shaw, who led the 54th Regiment during the Civil War, the first all-black regiment, and other useful items like this cameo and coin. The idea is to spend the day strolling through the gardens and the house, but since Annie wasn't invited, we didn't do that. Another fun part of the day was driving through the longest covered bridge in North America. Ramsey barely fit. Things were progressing just fine on the wedding front, so the following day we went to visit the Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park. And on the way, I got to see Kechi Gorge, which is 165 feet deep. As I took this video with my iPhone looking out over the bridge on Highway 4, I wondered how many people dropped their phones down there. The national park is a beautiful estate as well as a working dairy farm. As I usually do in these national parks, I watched the video in the visitor center. I learned that George Perkins Marsh first established the estate in the early 1800s. Frederick Billings bought the estate from George Marsh in 1869. Lawrence Rockefeller married Billings' granddaughter Mary French. Together, Lawrence and Mary ran the estate through the 20th century until it was donated to the National Park System. What all of these men had in common was that they were conservationists. The best part, though, about this place is the baby cows. Some were just a few days old, some were a few weeks old. They all liked a good pet. All the cows are Jersey cows with this golden brown color. Again at 3 this afternoon. Another busy eating and drinking water. Heading back to Norwich, we saw another covered bridge. Norwich itself is a really pretty little town. It's across the Connecticut River from Hanover, where Dartmouth is. I spent the morning of the wedding having coffee on the veranda of the Norwich Inn, walking Annie around town and taking in the sights, and shopping at Dan & Witt's, which is the ultimate small-town general store. It has everything. My brother and his wife's 55-acre farm is about 10 minutes outside town. Their daughter got married on the same knoll they got married 32 years ago. The weather held out for the reception, and I got some family time with my brothers who live on the other side of America from me. After a wedding breakfast the next day, Annie and I hit the road. We said goodbye to Cooper, a corgi who's even older than Annie is. Our destination was Chester, Massachusetts. There was an RV park that was the closest I could find to Springfield, where I would take up the Henry Knox Trail the next day. Sleepy Hollow RV Resort is really nice. It's right by a creek, where a bear, about 1 year old, had taken up residence. He tried very hard to get into the camp's dumpster, which is only about 50 feet from my van. I'm hungry. He'd been hanging out for a few days, and no mommy bear had shown up yet. Day 19, I started my book tour for the Henry Knox Trail, which I will cover in a separate video. But the second stop was Springfield, and the marker for the Henry Knox Trail is right in front of a national site, the Springfield Armory National Historic Site. During the colonial days, the British didn't allow the Americans to make their own guns or their own cannon. When Henry Knox took over as head of armament for the Army, he had to find a place for us to make guns. He suggested Springfield because we already had facilities that were appropriate. I spent the night that night at Wells State Park near Sturbridge, Massachusetts. It was right by a lake, really pretty. I had a place to myself and had great showers the next morning. To find it, I used the All Stays app. The first screen shows you everything related to RVing in the area where you are. The icon next to Wells State Park is typical for public lands. The W stands for Walmart. The CB stands for Crater Barrel, where you can also stay in their parking lot sometimes. The black icon with the RV indicates a private campground. Pilot is one of the truck stop companies. T stands for toll, and sometimes you'll get information about bridges that are too low and where to find propane. When I clicked on the icon for Wells State Park, I got the screen to the right. As you can see, that gave me a phone number, website information, reviews, and descriptions. I did the same thing to find Sutton Falls camping area the next night. It's a private campground, but kind of in the woods, so you feel like you're in a park. The best part was having coffee by the lake the next morning. Here we are in this tiny dock, having some coffee. Annie's happy to be away from the hot van. Why don't you bunk in? You know she can't hear, right? Anyway, the van's over there. Those two yurts are empty right now, thank goodness, so I can use their private dock. I'm feeling quite luxurious, really. We resumed our trek south on day 23. I was headed to Shenandoah National Park. I was going to see my cousin Haven in Gibson Island on the way, and I found a place at Croton Point to stay midway. It's right on the Hudson River, and when the weather's better, probably a big resort for children and water sports. I hadn't been watching the news, and I didn't know that Hurricane Florence was on its way. Here we are, crossing the Delaware. I was surprised by how many tolls you have to pay between Boston and Maryland. Next, we crossed the Susquehanna River. Now notice that narrow spit of land I have to cross to get to Gibson Island.
Okay. Look at those waves. Alright, we made it through that part.
Annie and I stayed inside where it was safe that night. The next day we headed west and made it to George Washington National Forest.
It's a pretty little creek, lots of little waterfalls. I think I have to go several miles up this road. My cell service, of course, is dead. So we're just forging our way into the middle of the forest. See what we find.
There's a really nice campground called Elizabeth Furnace. Because of the storm, there were plenty of sites available. I was really excited about seeing Shenandoah National Park. It was already foggy as I hit the road, and not any better when I got to the park. The whole point of the drive as it crests the hill is to take the dozens of turnoffs and look at all the beautiful views. From this turnout, you're supposed to be able to see the pinnacles. So Shenandoah is one long skinny park along the ridge. It's 100 and something miles. But because of the fog, I started up here, but then I turned off at this bird visitor center or whatever it is. I got out of the park and took the freeway. A lot of the state parks I called were closed because of the storm, so I pulled into the Dixie Caverns Resort and spent the night. Next stop was Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. The weather was great. The storm was behind me. I did stop at a Walmart and stock up on food, and I filled up with gas any chance I could. You pass through Knoxville on your way to the park. There are lots of touristy hotels, and you also have Dollyland. Smoky Mountain is the most popular of all the parks. Hurricane Florence was catching up with me as I got there and it started to rain, but at least I was able to get a campsite in the middle of the park. We are having steelhead trout on sale at Walmart. If you don't get any, sorry Annie. You see that it's pouring rain. Asparagus that I got at Walnut March, and green beans from the Vokies' backyard. We're very cozy here at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I don't have any neighbors that way. I do have some tent neighbors that way. Can't even imagine putting up a tent in this pouring rain. We are so lucky. Here you have the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So this area on top here is Tennessee, and this is North Carolina down here. And you enter most from Knoxville, anyway, this area here. Spent the night at Elkmont Campground, got up the next day and followed this most important trail up to the ridge, and then that goes down into North Carolina. But I turned around here, went back that way because that's most beautiful, and then continued because I was going westward. You can see why the American Indians called these the Smoky Mountains. This is from the crest at the top of the ridge. The top of the ridge is also part of the Appalachian Trail. Unfortunately, seeing the major waterfalls would have meant leaving Annie in the van. You follow the creek as you exit the park. The next destination was Memphis at the other end of Tennessee, but we weren't going to make it that night. But using my trusty All Stays app, I found Pool Knobs Campground near Nashville. As you can see, it's by a lake, which is called the Percy Priest Lake. Annie and I got a lakeside site. Annie and I have our own private beach tonight, don't we, baby? Yep. There's Ramsey up there, all plugged in. You can check out this sunset. This is the next morning. I could have stayed there all day. In fact, it would be nice to be there now. Oh well, I took a bunch of videos and that will just have to do. Have to move on. Day 29. I have some really good friends, Kevin and Shelley, in Memphis. I couldn't wait to see them, and I couldn't wait to see their town. We boondocked in their driveway at night, but during the day we enjoyed the cool of their house and got some laundry done. Good friend time with Shelley, and I was able to see Kevin's amazing art show at a gallery in downtown Memphis. They gave me a great tour of town, but unfortunately I left my phone at their house, so these pictures were taken the next day. Beale Street is the hangout for blues. The new Brass Pro Shops have live alligators on display. And we made it to the Peabody Hotel just in time to see the ducks that live during the day in the fountain in the lobby march to the elevators to be taken upstairs where they spend the night. Across the Mississippi from Memphis is Arkansas, and the southern portion of that state is dedicated to Bill Clinton. There's a museum where he was born in Hope. He grew up in Hot Springs, and then he worked in Little Rock, which is the capital. My goal was to visit the Civil Rights Museum at Central High School in Little Rock, and then to go to the beautiful Hot Springs National Park. That is the Mississippi, and that is the M Bridge that I'm about to go over on Highway 40. More Mississippi. I'm leaving Memphis. As you can probably figure out, the M Bridge is M for Mississippi, M for Memphis, and M for the shape of the bridge. The river itself is awe-inspiring. I'm here in Little Rock at the Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site. Here's Central High School. And here's the National Park Service Visitor Center. There's Ramsey. I didn't need to see the video at this National Historic Site. I remember the drama in my high school. I remember the riots and the police surrounding our school. And as a young teacher, I learned how unfairly some neighborhoods were treated. Are things any better now? Hot Springs National Park was quite a contrast. It's where the wealthy used to hang out. We're here at Hot Springs National Park. On the right, it's Historical Park, and on the left is the city of Hot Springs. It's a much more dog-friendly, and it's also the home of children. Much more dog-friendly place than the other national parks. We have reserved a site for Ramsey. We have a home tonight, so we are happy. It was still a good 95 degrees out and humid, but anyway, we walked up the road looking at all the old bathhouses. Many of them offer for as little as $25 a dip in the hot waters. In the 30s, a lot of them adopted this Mediterranean kind of California style, and then we got this magnolia. So that's the Arlington. I gather that's the hot place to stay. If you come here, it's at the very end of the road, which we just went this way. Annie, do I need to carry you back? She started walking. Notice that the parking is free. That's the southern end of the road and the northern end. This is where you load up on healing waters. The campground was very nice. I think with my senior discount, I paid $12. On to Oklahoma and the Chickasaw National Recreation Area. Back in the early 1900s, this area was a popular destination because of its hot springs. According to the ranger, more people came here than to Yellowstone. It was the last lush green area I would see until I reached California, and I was only halfway across the U.S. We parked near Lake Arbuckles and had some time to walk around before sunset. So the campsites are up there. And then we're out here by this lake. Sun's going to go down in a little while. In the morning, it was cool enough to leave Annie in the van so I could see the nature center. Huh? Oh, that was a cute little sound. Then I took a tour of the park. This is the Bromide Pavilion, where people came to get the cure from the water. As early as 1907, the original building was 1907, and this was rebuilt by the Conservation Corps in 1936. From Chickasaw, we headed into Texas toward the Allie Flint Quarries National Monument. It's right by Amarillo, but we wouldn't quite get there before sundown. We said goodbye to green fields and oil wells, and hello to the Texas desert and cotton fields. Pushing 4 o'clock and not wanting to arrive in Amarillo when it was dark, I found a place called Greenbelt Reservoir County Campground. For a $5 license fee, we had the place to ourselves, except for the little raccoon we scared from under the van when we got up the next morning. Day 33 was just not a good day. I had to go to the T-Mobile in Amarillo because I couldn't get my phone to work. I was reminded what it's like to travel without a phone, a GPS, or the app that helps me find campgrounds. Allie was also very disappointing. There's not much to see, and when I took a walk with Annie, it was blistering hot, and we got these thorns in our feet that made us both bleed. We left without any pictures because my phone was charging and not even a brochure, and headed to Pecos National Monument near Santa Fe. For the night, I found another beautiful campsite overlooking Santa Rosa Lake. It was a state park ground, so not too expensive. There were signs for rattlesnakes everywhere. Biting black flies prevented us from eating outside, and I freaked out when a scorpion got into Annie's water bowl. But after that, things got better. Oh, and the park had a dump station, so I could empty my black tanks. The next morning, we went down through Santa Rosa again, which is on the old Route 66, then headed for Pecos National Monument. We climbed from 4,000 feet to 7,000 feet elevation. Pecos National Historic Park is in Pecos National Forest, which is along the Pecos River. The Pecos people have lived here for probably over 1,000 years. What you see now are the ruins of a Spanish church that was built in the 1680s and the foundation of an early pueblo. The Spanish built their missions here as early as 1541. Being such an important crossroads geographically, it's no wonder the Spanish built Santa Fe 20 minutes down the road. I'd been here before, and it's an incredibly beautiful and peaceful place. On the square in Santa Fe, glad to know it's still a pretty mellow place. Petroglyph National Monument was high on my can't wait to see list. But when I got to Albuquerque, it was really hot and I couldn't leave Annie in the car. So I drove up and down Route 66 and checked out the lovely signs and drove over the Rio Grande. The trouble is, as you can see from the clouds forming, it started to rain. I found an RV park on Route 40 called the High Desert RV Resort and tucked in for the night. This is what it looked like the next morning. They had a very adequate laundry facility, which was a good thing, and it was close to the freeway. I'm not sure if it was the hot weather, the desert, or just having been on the road for 35 days, but I was starting to get ready to go home. Still, there were a lot of national parks I wanted to see on the way. Malpais is the Spanish word for badlands. These uninhabitable lands are different from the badlands in South Dakota. The park is basically a big bed of lava rock surrounded by limestone cliffs. Started with the visitor center here, went back to the freeway, and then we've been coming down alongside to here where the arches and all that purple stuff. There's a big lava bed mostly. We're going to go back up over here and then down this way, and then eventually it takes us over to a Morro National Monument. Near the south end of the east side is an arch, which is a little hard to see in this video because of the shade.
This is called the Narrows because we're between these lava beds and these high cliffs.
I then backtracked on Highway 40 in search of Acoma Pueblo, otherwise known as Sky City. It's a 1,000-year-old pueblo built on top of a cliff. But in order to see it, I would have left Annie in the car for 2 hours, so I saw it on YouTube instead. I went up to North Acomita Village to have a burger, then took 40 back to where 53 breaks off, takes you on the west side of the lava beds of El Malpais National Monument and on to El Morro National Monument, passing the Continental Divide on the way. Notice how high up we are. Morro was the Spanish term that essentially meant headland or landmark. Imagine yourself as a pioneer and you're walking across the desert and you see that point, and you know that that's supposed to be on your left, and you're going to take the pass on the right. Not only that, but at the base of that landmark is a fresh pool of water, and you haven't seen fresh water for 100 miles. This is one of my favorite places on the whole trip, and we timed our visit just right. We got to the visitor center before it closed, and they told us about the campground. It's just back up the road. There are only 10 sites. We got the last one, and they're free. The next morning, when it was still cool, we went back to the visitor center and took the loop walk, which took you by the pool and the inscriptions. Fortunately, it was short, and Annie could come with me. The campground had no hookups, so I leveled Ramsey to use the propane, read for a while at the picnic table, and these are my views outside my window. Day 36 was a super day. We took the loop trail at El Morro to see the pool and the inscription rock, drove to Zuni Pueblo to have lunch, and then spent the afternoon driving through Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona. Returning to the visitor center first thing in the morning, I got a guide for the walking tour. Ancient American Indians, Spanish, and pioneers in the 1800s who would walk through this way, drink from the pool, and then leave their signature on a rock called Inscription Rock. The guide told us who these people were who had signed the rock. In the far corner is the pool. Here's the headland. And then the inscriptions are all around that area, all the way up to the pool. So we walked to the pool, which wasn't very far. So those black stripes are where the water comes from the bluff above. And then there's the path going that way. The pool is never empty. It just keeps getting filled from water from the bluff. So for 500 years, people have been leaving their signatures on this rock, saying that they've drunk the waters or that they've passed through here. The early Spanish signatures were beautiful script, and the later 19th century were printed. All right, the petroglyphs are big horned sheep, and then that inscription up there is from Ramon Garcia Jurado, who moved to New Mexico as a colonist in 1693. It's dated 1709. That one's dated 1692, then 1658, 1852. As I rounded the bend, it was getting really hot, so back to the visitor center we went. I bought roasted corn in the Zuni Pueblo for lunch. My yummy corn is all gone. My roasted corn, it was so yummy. That's a little stand where I bought it. That's my view while I ate. That's good. On to Arizona and Petrified Forest National Park. So here's the map of Petrified Forest National Park. And the drive is about 28 miles, but you take so many turnoffs that it takes several hours. So you get off at the northern gate off of Highway 40, and then you go north for a little while to see vistas for the Painted Desert here. Then you cross, there's a marker for where Route 66 used to be, and then you follow it and you take all these turnoffs for various sites. And you finally come out at the south gate, and there's several gift shops down here with parking lots that allow you to boondock for the night, which is what I did. Starting with the Painted Desert, this view is from Toponi Point, and this one is from Chindi Point. Crossing where Route 66 used to be, there's this placard that explains everything and shows pictures of what life used to be like, and then this old car. Not much else except the railroad track. After crossing Interstate 40, you get into these badlands and a turnoff called Blue Mesa. You pass some interesting rock formations before you reach Agate Bridge, which is a petrified log over a small gorge. This valley covered in broken pieces of petrified logs is called Jasper Forest. This is Crystal Forest. We get a close-up and personal look at these beasts. There's a bigger trail too. The biggest chunks were near the visitor center at the southern entrance. There were 3 of us boondocking by the gift shop. I bought some gifts for my family to pay my way. Day 37, my last day of sightseeing. I would see 4 national sites having to do with the American Indians. This map from the Rupatki Visitor Center shows all the native tribes that clustered around the Little Colorado and Rio Grande rivers. I was struggling with the hot 100-degree weather. I will return when it's cooler and do justice to this area. For this trip, I went from Petrified Forest National Park to Walnut Canyon National Monument, which is in the city limits of Flagstaff, then north to a loop that includes the Sunset Crater volcano and the Rupatki National Monument Pueblo. From there I went back south through Flagstaff to the Montezuma Castle National Monument and then started my way back to Pasadena. Walnut Canyon is a Y-shaped gorge, a very deep one, where the American natives made their homes in caves. There are strenuous trails everywhere that you can take to explore all these caves. This whole area is volcanic and there are hundreds of volcanoes. But Sunset Crater, which is a cinder cone, blew its top relatively recently, 900 years ago. You drive through the park with a volcano right to the right here, and then on the left is the lava bed. The Rupatki Pueblo is on the north side. It didn't get covered, but the hot ash did force people to move. You continue on the 34-mile loop to get to the Pueblo. It was deserted some 900 years ago. Renderings in the visitor center show what it probably looked like. And there's a model of the amazing construction, which included 2 layers of insulation. You've probably seen Montezuma's castle in tourist brochures. There's a beautiful walk under sequoia trees. With the aid of my zoom lens, I could see some of the caves where the people who didn't live in the castle lived. When I visited the castle when I was a kid in 1964, you could still walk around the ruins. Today you have to be content with looking at the model. So much to see and so little time to see it. I boondocked that night at a rest stop near Quartzsite, Arizona, and watched my last sunset out of my van. Well, that's it for this time. If you like this video, push the thumbs up button down below and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching, and keep on rambling.